occupational health hazard and their health effects. Workplace hazard and ill health. The main thrust of the concept of occupational health is to emphasize prevention of occupational disease and work-related illness rather than its cure. Technical and ethical guidelines for workers' health surveillance, OS Series number 72, shows the recent changes in occupational health. With technical progress, more sophisticated means of investigation, greater emphasis on prevention, and holistic approaches on primary health care, human rights, and organization aspects are now available. This has led the Joint International Labour Organization World Health Organization ILO or WHO Committee on Occupational Health to redefine the concept of occupational health during its 12th session in 1995. Under these new circumstances, a tripartite ILO committee of experts used to use the definition as a starting point to develop guidelines for adapting workers' health surveillance to these changes. The purpose of health surveillance need clarification. The individual and collective health assessment must be combined. Workers' health surveillance must operate under controlled well-organization condition, preferably in accordance with the ILO's Occupational Health Service Convention. This convention sets general principles on occupational health practice and how to establish and run health services. Be based on sound ethical and technical practices. Ensure professional independence and impartiality of health professionals, as well as workers' privacy and confidential of individual health information. Definition of occupational health. Occupational health has been defined by the ILO and the WHO as the promotion and maintenance of the highest degree of physical, mental, and social well-being of workers of all occupational, preventing among its workers of departures from health caused by their working conditions, protection of workers in their employment from risk usually from factors adverse to health, placing and maintenance of their work in occupational environment adapted to his/her physiological ability. As you know, occupational health encompasses the social, mental, and physical well-being of workers in all occupation. It includes the protection of workers from illness arising from work through promotion of safety and health programs. It should be always be a priority to adapt the work to the human being. Poor working conditions have the potential to affect a worker's health and safety. Poor working condition can be affect not only the workers but their families, other people in the community, and the physical environment. Review on occupational health. Recall the different hazards presented in a previous module. Exposure to this health hazard is most often the cause of ill health, and that is why you want to avoid. Eliminating exposures to hazard removes the condition for ill health and its negative consequences while you are at work. The ill health that results from exposure to harmful environmental conditions in the workplace explained in the flowchart. So, exposure, potential harmful agents. So, daghan agents or substances na magamit or mabuhat sa work pero pwede ma-harm atong health. Kay basin allergic di ta ato na chemical or harmful jud siya sa ato ang body. Napoy biological agents like bacteria, virus, or other microorganism na maka-cause og infection sa ato ang body. Response. Normal altered body response. So diri mag-start ang response sa imong body like headache, sakit, pamamaga, rashes o mga uban pa. Result: homeostasis or disease. So diri na mag-start ang result sa disease na makakos siya mga harmful na agents like example skin cancer, anemia, hypertension. Key concept in occupational health: you should realize that predisposition of a worker to suffer from an occupational illness depends on the characteristic of exposure to an hazard on individual susceptibility. Not all workers exposed to hazards get sick. For example, some workers become deaf because of the noise of only after prolonged and frequent exposure to high levels of noise over many years. So dili tanan workers exposed sa hazard, na uban na mabungol kay tungod sa exposed sa high level na sound, ang uban magka-injury, na uban ma-accident. So remember that workplace hazard can potentially cause harm to avoid workers. However, the risk or the likelihood that this harmful effect would take place depends on the condition of exposure. This factor includes intensity and duration of exposure to the hazard, timing of exposure, and multiplicity of exposure. 1. Exposure duration or the length of time being invulnerable to the work hazards. Constant exposure to amounts which has a low levels in workplace over a prolonged period of time increase the risk of disease after a latency period. The interval between exposure to a hazards and the clinical appearance of the disease. So, is maka-increase jud siya sa disease labaw nagdugay jud ka sa lugar na exposed kaayo sa mga hazards. Magnitude level or dose exposure as concentration or amount of hazard is increased, likely it can do more harm. The more na hazard na imong idungag kay makakos na jud siya sakit sa atong body. Timing of exposure: this related to the exposure duration. A worker who is exposed to hazard continuously or for several periods in a day is more at risk than those with less exposure. Kung ang employee kay exposed kaayo siya sa adlaw-adlaw, mas delikado pa siya sa mga ginagmay or less na exposure sa hazard. Multiplicity of exposure: exposures to mix of hazard or several chemicals at the same time can cause synergistic or cumulative effects. Ang synergistic kay cause na siya sa duha ka chemicals effect na mas greater pa ang effects kaysa separate o individual effects nila. Despite having similar exposure to workplace hazard, workers may be affected differently due to non-occupational factors. In smokers, for instant clearance dust that have entered the lungs is inhibited, thereby increasing the risk of succumbing to the illness of the hazard. The non-occupational factors thus must be considered, including age, sex, generic factors, previous medical history, and lifestyle habits of the worker. Age is an important factor since elderly and young workers have poor metabolic process, which allow to build up of toxic substances in a normal adult. This substance can be easily neutralized. So, kay the more na elder ang employee or worker, dali lang siya magkasakit like chemical. Same po siya sa younger workers, dapat jud naa jud ka sa tamang edad kay dali lang siya ma-neutralize. So sex is a very important consideration too. A hazard agent may be toxic to female workers or non-toxic to male workers or vice versa. For pregnant women, some toxins may cause development problems in the fetus. Lead and mercury have been documented that cause neurological defect effects in offspring of exposed pregnant women in both men and women. Other toxin may affect their reproductive system. The genetic makeup of a worker should also be considered because those with a history of allergies will find it difficult to work in an environmental where their allergy would be likely flare up. Also, those with enzyme deficiencies may not be able to handle toxic substances that enter the body. So, ang makeup na po siya yung mga sagol na chemical or harmful po siya na chemical sa mo na magkakos og mga allergies nya. Your medical history is important to identify previous illness which may aggravate to substances or agent found in a workplace. An anemic, weak, pale work worker who will be employed in a company using lead and may continue suffering from anemia, condition characterized by abnormality low number of red blood cells in circulating blood due to lead exposure. A worker diagnosed with a liver disease should be closely monitored if she would be working with solvents which may compromise the liver function. Lifestyle factors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, unhealthy diet, drugs abuse, among others, can be alter a worker's natural defense mechanism and increase the chance of developing ill effects. For example, high risk of liver disease in workers exposed to solvents in a history of alcohol consumption, or increased risk of hypertension in a worker with occupational stress who is also eating high salt and high fat diet. The risk of lung cancer is much greater in a worker who have workplace exposure, asbestos, fiber, and who also smoke. Health effects of chemical hazard. Workers are exposed to various chemicals in a workplace. These chemicals have inherent toxicity that can potentially harm humans depending on the amount that enter the body and the condition of exposure. Here are the some concepts that must be understood. Toxicity is the interest capacity of chemical agent to the adversary affect an organism, include humans. Toxic chemicals is the agent that can cause the adverse effect. Hazard is a potential for a toxicity to be realized in specific settings or situation. Exposure refers to the process or extent that the worker experiences or comes to in contact with particular hazard in a workplace or as a result of one's occupation. Dose is the amount of toxic agent that has entered the body. Risk is probably a chance of a specific adverse effect or occur. Points to consider regarding inhalation. Although the body filters many of the normal pollutants from the air personal breathes, it cannot eliminate every type of the contaminant. Small particles are difficult for the body to eliminate and can deep into the lungs where they can cause respiratory problems. Workers in industry occupations are more susceptible to respiratory disease than a worker in non-dusty occupations. Chemical in their various form can be inhaled and damage various target organs most affected, as well as the lungs. Points to consider regarding skin absorption of substances. The skin is a major route to entry of hazardous substances in a workplace. Chemical can be absorbed faster through inflamed or unbred skin. Solvents may also absorb in healthy skin into a bloodstream and transport to target organs where they can have damaging result. Points to consider regarding entries of hazardous agents through the mouth. Hazardous agents can be entered the body by being digest or swallow, usually through involuntary action, which you may not be aware of, such through smoking, eating, and contaminated materials in workplace, or eating with unwashed hands. So, example, magkaon ka, then wala ka naghunaw na ay chance na makaon nimo or magunitan nimo imong naong, mo na mag-cause na burn sa imong skin. Although some ingested hazardous agents are neutralized in the stomach, others are absorbed into the bloodstream and transported into the target organs. The most important methods of the prevention is normal hygiene. You should must ensure that the access to washing facilities and that food storage or dining areas are separated from your work areas to avoid contamination with hazardous agent. Dapat layo jud imong working areas or dining area para ma-prevent nimo ang hazard chemical etc. Or og gina dapat na kay proper hygiene like manarapo ka, manghilamos, after sa work manghunaw ka para ma-prevent nimo ang hazardous. The effect may be seen immediately acute or may show up the months or year after exposure. Chronic, again, the effect or depend on the type, the chemical, the route of the entry, and degree of exposure. Target organ toxicity occurs the disease state of the adverse health effects manifest in a specific organ system of the body. The different organs specific to the body. The effects are 1. Blood toxicity. 2. Dermal toxicity. Adverse effects on the skin. 3. Eye toxicity. 4. Hepatotoxicity. Adverse effects on the liver. 5. Immunotoxicity. Adverse effect on the immune system. 6. Nephrotoxicity. Adverse effects on the kidneys. 7. Neurotoxicity. Adverse effects on the brain or nerves outside of the brain. 8. Reproductive toxicity. Adverse effect on the reproductive system. 9. Respiratory toxicity. Adverse effect on lungs. Organ-specific disease that may arise from chemical exposure in a workplace. So, morning causative agent, industries, target organ disease mo na sa itong chart karon. So, unsa ning causative agents? Mo na mercury, na chloroform, na bagast, plastic epoxys. So, unsang cause niya? Asa nimo siya makuha? Pwede siya sa battery chemical industries, sa solvent chemical industries, mining, sandblasting, coal mining, construction industries, agriculture, o sa plastic or varnish. Yeah. So, unsay target niya kung exposed jud kay kaani na chemical or sa agent? Pwede target niya kidney, respiratory system, o immune system or sa skin nimo. Unsang possible na makuha nimo na disease? For example, kidney, chronic renal failure, renal stones, nephrotic syndromes, o uban pa. So, dari sa isa ka chart nato, napa siya klase-klase na makuha nato na agent, solvent, ammonia, tapos asa nimo siya makuha? Chemical process, plastic, pulp, paper production laboratory. Unsang target niya na organ? Immune system og lungs. Pwede ka magka-asthma, irritation, inflammation, og edema, og uban pa. Health effects of physical hazard noise, extremes of temperature indicate illumination, radiation, vibration, or among the physical hazard that workers experience in their environments. So, noise. Although some claim that the noise is subjective, you cannot deny that damage results in the intensity of noise. The louder of the noise, the more likely noise induced illness will occur. The duration of exposure to the loud sound in the work environment, the longer a work is exposed to the risk for hearing impairment is also greater. And the type of noise very loud, such as the blast, may immediately destroy the eardrum and affect the level of the hearing. So, para ma-prevent na to ni siya, maggamit tag hearing protection. ug maglikay ta sa mga very loud sounds para sa mga buto or unsa pa na siya dira. Intensity in a noise can range from even quietly sounds to the loudest bearable noises. The range of permissible noises exposure in the Philippines is found below. Duration, day hours, 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 1 half, 1 and 1 half, or 1/4 or less. Sound level dB, 90, 92, 95, 97, 100, 102, 105, 110, o 115. Heat. Heat is a form of thermal energy which may come from a body metabolism, increased physical activities, radiation from hot objects or from the sun, and byproducts of industrial processes to keep the temperature at a stable level. The amount of heat gained by the body must be equal to the amount of loss. Heat loss happens through convection, radiation, conduction, and evaporation. Cold. In the Philippines, exposed to cold environment only occurs in certain work areas, i.e. ice plants and freezers in the food industry. Being a tropical country, the Philippines does not present cold stress as a served occupational hazard, but it still is important OSH issues in some sectors. Cold exposure and the associated behavioral and psychological reaction have an impact on a human performance at a various level of complexity. Mild exposure implies no or negligible body core cooling and moderate cooling of the skin and extremities. Severe exposure results in negative heat balance, a drop in a core temperature, and concomitant pronounced lowering of temperature of the extremities. Radiation, non-ionizing and ionizing. Ionizing radiation is capable of producing ion pairs by interaction with matter. Ionizing radiation differs from the other form of radiant energy in being able to deposit enough localized energy in an absorbing materials to disturb atoms and molecules and produce ion and free radical that cause biological changes. Alpha particles, beta particle, neutrons, X-ray, and gamma ray are examples of ionizing radiation. So, ionizing radiation, kay short, iyahang wavelength, high iyang frequency, higher energy, and ionizing radiation, naa siya sufficient energy to produce ions in a matter at the molecule level. In non-ionizing radiation or INR there is not enough energy to cause ionization of matter. So non-ionizing kay long iyahang wavelength og lower iyang frequency og lower iyahang energy. The types of INR are ultraviolet rays, infrared, laser, microwaves, radio frequencies, extremely low frequencies, and static fields. They have distinctive features depending on their wavelength. Different processes in the workplace can produce INR apart from the sunlight. Welding is another source of UV. Source of RF and MW radiation include radio emitters and cell phones, while sources of IR are furnaces, heat lamps, and IR lasers. So, kung exposed pud kaayo ka sa INR, ma-affect pud imuhang body organ systems. Ang usual target na organ UV radiation kay ang skin og ato ang eyes. Ang effect sa skin kay redness, premature skin aging og skin cancer. Ang effect pud sa eyes, retinal injuries og types of conjunctivitis na known as welder's flash, corneal og conjunctive burns. Lasers are potential hazards are also affect both the skin and the eye. Vibration is a physical factor that causes mechanical escalation It affects workers when mechanical energy is transmitted to the body. There are two types of vibration. General are whole body vibration and local or segment vibration. Workers apparently having equipment or driving buses or trucks are exposed to the general or the whole body vibration. Workers using pneumatic or powered hand tools such as drills, grinders, chainsaws are exposed to local or segment vibration. Exposed to the whole body vibration can cause discomfort or cause injury. It also associated with elevated health risks for low back pain in workers exposed for many to intense whole body vibration. Stomach problems, headache, and muscle pains have been reported among workers with occupational exposure to the whole body vibration. Illumination. Proper lighting or illumination of the workplace is important to have safe and healthy workers. Signs that are lighted properly decrease the risk of accident. Educate. Illumination provides productivity by ensuring that details of the task can be easily seen by the workers, thereby decreasing errors and wasting of materials. It is not only the quantity of the light in a work area that is important for optimum vision, but the quality as well. For example, shadows and silhouettes can be produced by improper light source or light distribution that is not informed. Inadequate illumination may cause visual complaints among workers and cause productive problems. The usual complaints after working in poorly lighted areas are visual fatigue, double vision, headaches, painful irritation, redness of eye or conjunctivitis, and frequent tearing or lacrimination. Importante kayo sa ato ang kahayag o light labon na sa dark places o sa trabaho. Iwas disturbance para sa ato para makafocus ta sa ato hang buhatonon. Pero pag kulang ang kahayag o sobra, mag-cause na siya pagsakit sa ulo, pamumula ng mata, etc. And that's end of our topic. Thank you.